The case of the prosecutor versus Ali Muhammad Ali Abd-Al-Rahman continued on the 6th of April 2022, with the first witness testimonies brought forth by the prosecution. Over the first 3 weeks of the trial, between the 6th of April and the 28th of May, Trial Chamber 1 comprised of presiding Judge Joanna Corner, Judge Renee Alapini Gansu, and Judge Althea Violet Alexis Windsor, heard the testimony of the first 7 witnesses. The prosecution is relying on these testimonies to support allegations against Mr. Abd-Al-Rahman, the alleged leader of the Janjaweed militia, who was accused of 31 counts of war crimes and crimes against humanity allegedly committed in Darfur, Sudan, between August 2003 and at least April 2004. These crimes include directing attacks against the civilian population, murders, pillaging, rape, persecution, torture, cruel treatment, and other inhumane acts. The trial chamber granted protective measures to some of the witnesses, such as the use of a pseudonym, voice and image distortion, as well as conducting parts of the trial in private sessions. On each occasion, the witnesses were first questioned by a representative of the prosecution, accompanied by senior trial lawyer Julian Nichols. Witnesses could then be invited to respond, with the chamber's authorization, to the legal representatives of victims, Nathalie von Mistinghausen or Anand Shah, before finally being questioned by lead defense counsel Cyril Lauchi and associate defense counsel Ian Edwards. The first witness to testify before the court was the joint witness for the prosecution and the defense, Professor Alexander William Lowndes de Waal, director of the World Peace Foundation. Professor de Waal answered questions about a report on Darfur that he produced for the Office of the Prosecutor. Working since the early 2000s on Darfur through academic research, field missions, and consultancy, the witness was first asked by the prosecution to give, on the basis of his report, an overview of the social, ethnic, historical, political, and local structures of this part of Sudan.
One of the really striking things about Sudan as a whole, and Darfur in particular, is the combination of inequality and poverty. So that if you were to travel to Khartoum, you would see a city that is a middle-income city. It would not be out of place on the southern shores of the Mediterranean. You travel to Darfur and you are in some of the poorest places of the planet. And the infrastructure, the basic infrastructure for life of any sort of developed life is extremely rudimentary. So that when I was living in Darfur from 1985 to 1987, most small towns would have a clinic. In half of those cases, the clinic would have lost its roof. It would have been so neglected over the previous few years. There would not have been a pharmacist, there would have been no supplies, and it would have become so dilapidated that the roof would have collapsed. During my months in Darfur, nearly 18 months, I think I used a telephone twice. There were 2 metalled roads. One was a tarmac road from the town of Nyala to Zalenji, about 200 kilometers. The other was a gravel road between Nyala and El Fasher, also 200 kilometers. This is in a region which is the size of France. So that to travel from one town to another, I mean, we're here in the Netherlands. You expect to calculate your travel time in hours and minutes. In Darfur, at that time, you would calculate it in days. There was a railway timetable. There was a single-track railway connecting Nyala to Khartoum, and the railway timetable was notable for its simplicity. I went to the railway station to ask when the train will leave, and they said, the train will leave on Monday sharp. And it would take, I said, when will it arrive in Khartoum? They said, if you are lucky, 3 days. if you are unlucky, 1 week. And I mean, I had never seen. I've traveled in many places in Africa. I have never seen a place with such low levels of healthcare and education. It is truly shocking.
Authorized by the trial chamber to question the witness, the legal representatives of victims requested more clarification regarding some extracts of his report to better understand the Darfur people.
And in this paragraph, you speak about Arab identity in Darfur, which is defined by family, lineage, rather than by language or culture. Could you explain to us how you would describe or encapsulate the Fur identity?
Thank you. It is a very intriguing question, actually, historically, and because the Fur historically were, prior to 1916, were the dominant group in Darfur, and the Fur were expanding. So the original sort of house of the Fur, the original lineage of the Fur, is a royal lineage called the Kera. And then the other Fur, the majority of the Fur groups, constitute a group called the Kunjara. And my command of the Fur language is very limited, but I understand that Kunjara means gathered together. So these were groups that adopted the Fur identity, language, customs during the period of the rule of the sultans from the 17th century to approximately 130 years ago. What these groups have in common is the Fur language, a tradition of affection for the set of values associated with the historic sultanate, a very strong attachment to the land, feeling that their identity is very closely tied in with their control over the land. That doesn't mean that they wanted to exclude others from the land. They have a long tradition of welcoming welcoming strangers who they would allow to settle. And those strangers would, over the generations, become part of the community and become Fur. And of course also welcoming nomads. So it is a set of values, along with culture, language, and affinity to a particular historical past.
In turn, the defense counsel asked more details about the conflict in Darfur, particularly about the years 2001 and 2002, which, according to the report, was a period of time in which the conflict deepened with a nascent rebellion.
In that paragraph, you identify 3 tribal components of the rebellion. That is the Fur communities in the islands of Jebel Mara, the Zagawa in the far north, and the Masalits on the border with Chad. My first question is, who took the decision to engage into rebellion? 3 components, sorry.
The rebellion came about through the convergence of several different elements. So there was a local intertribal element, especially between the Zaghawa and the Arabs in the north. There was and there was a recurrent tension in the far west with the Masalit and Arabs. There had been subsequent to the the administrative reform of 1994. There was fighting there in 1995 and again in 1999, and that situation remained unresolved. The rebellion was led by two groups. There was a group of radical revolutionary students, a mixture of, most of them four, led by Abd-Al-Wahid al-Noor, who set up a base in Jabal Mara and began to organize armed resistance. And the leaders of the dissident Islamists of the Justice and Equality movement led by Khalil Ibrahim.
6 more factual witnesses came to testify about what they saw and experienced. They all spoke of attacks on the villages they were in and described burning, looting, and arrests. Witness P0903 testified about Tendi, witness P0029 to Kudum and Bindisi, and witnesses P0651, P0736, and P0712 spoke of Fear and other villages close to Delij and Delij itself. They also identified the perpetrators of the attacks as the Janjaweed. Witness P0712 explained the meaning of the word Janjaweed.
The Janjaweed, as known in our country, is a group of people from Arab tribes who ride camels and horses and own weapons, and they kill different people from different tribes and pillage markets and villages. This is the group of people known as Janjaweed in our country.
Thank you very much.
Well, the next question is an obvious one, isn't it? How do you know that?
Because there are no other tribes who owned weapons and were riding horses and camels and pillaged villages. It's common knowledge. Those are the tribes that killed people, pillaged villages, and burnt parts of villages. The Janjaweed are well known in our area, and there are no other tribes in our area other than the Arabs who owned weapons. They are the ones who owned weapons and killed people and pillaged villages.
When questioned by the legal representatives of victims, witness P0712 was granted further protective measures by conducting his testimony in private sessions. In public, he responded to the possibility of him returning to Darfur after more than 15 years since the incidents.
And Mr. Witness, my last question for you is, would you like to return to live in Darfur one day?
Of course, if the situation goes back to normal, but for now, I cannot go back.
Questioned by the defense, witness P0712 was requested to give more details about the Janjaweed and the rebellion.
And earlier you said that, still defining the Janjaweeds, that they are the ones having weapons, and you said there is no other tribe having weapons. Do you want to confirm that? That means that other tribes like the Fur, for instance, did not have weapons?
In the past, the Fur used to have weapons. However, they had to lay down the weapons upon instructions of the government, and they do not. So at that time, they did not have any weapons. The Fur did not have any weapons. Only the Arabs had weapons. with the support of the government, which was providing them with the arms and weapons. However, the third tribe did not have any weapons, and personally, I did not see any such weapons with tribes other than Arabs.
The trial in the case of the prosecutor versus Ali Muhammad Ali Abd-Al-Rahman continued on the 9th of May 2022 with the appearances of new witnesses called by the Office of the Prosecutor.